Have you ever been in a state of sudden blood rushing to your head, you're breathing heavily, your heart is racing, your hands and feet are getting numb and cold, and you are preparing yourself to run away from something? Now let's imagine a scenario when this happens. It could be as simple as a dog chasing us, or even if we see a snake in the woods. But imagine waking up to this feeling and living with it daily without even knowing what is actually causing this feeling, constantly worrying about everything around us. This is what we call an anxiety disorder. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Recently, I realized a worrying trend in my practice. I used to get 1 to 2 walking-in patients suffering from anxiety distress prior to the pandemic days. Nowadays, I'm getting this number on a daily basis. Now, we can understand the cause of it is pandemic, but the sad thing is, these patients walk in not knowing what is happening to themselves and they feel completely scrambled about it. Having personally experienced anxiety distress to a certain degree myself, in today's video, let's explore why anxiety occurs, why is it important for us, and I'd like to share 3 tips on managing anxiety besides being dependent on medication. So let's go. In order for us to manage anxiety effectively, we must first of all understand why anxiety happens. Anxiety is a survival mechanism that is very important to us, all animals, including us humans. As ancient cave dwellers, our ancestors, whenever they are posed with a real threat, for example a saber-toothed tiger or even a big brown bear, our anxiety is what activates a response that prepares us to either fight this danger or run away from it. And there's a famous term even coined for this, which is a fight or flight response. But as human beings evolved throughout the years, our brain also evolved together with us, making us a complex, intelligent species. One of the most important part that got evolved was our prefrontal cortex. And this prefrontal cortex is what analyzes information, gives us the power to reason, to manage our emotions, and to plan for us. But when we are faced with an uncertainty, our reasoning mind gets shut down and immediately the survival brain, which I call the old brain, kicks in to ensure our survivability amongst everything else. A classic example of this is that in the early pandemic days, if we see when nations, governments, scientists and everybody didn't know what is actually happening and how are we going to contain the situation, ordinary people among us got into the state of panic, went into supermarkets and grocery stores, buying everything we could, storing them up in our house, preparing for an unforeseen disaster looming ahead. This is an example how the survival brain kicked in and the reasoning mind got shut down. A huge part of handling anxiety is to ride the experience out, simply being aware. As how the author Alan Watts explained in his book The Wisdom of Insecurity, whenever the state of anxiety happens, don't judge them as something as bad or it's good, or even don't try to suppress them. Simply observe our mind, our actions and our thoughts when this feeling appears, and or even try to retrace our actions when we are observing it in the middle of the anxiety. An example I can give is that I have an extreme fear of riding roller coaster rides, even up till today. The difference is that nowadays I've learned how to manage it. So whenever I go to a theme park or an amusement park nowadays, I usually will go through the entire bitter experience of state of panic and anxiety riding the roller coaster out, and immediately I will stand in line to get into the same roller coaster ride again the second time, immediately after the first one. The rationale behind this method, I believe, is that by giving enough information for the newer part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, to access the information through experience and exposure, it helps to teach the mind to assess the level of threat, whether it exists or not, and it prepares us to better handle it the next time the same level of anxiety appears within ourselves. The method of riding the experience out and simply being aware is easier said than done. If we have seen a person who's undergoing an anxiety attack, it is simply very difficult for us to rationalize with them. An analogy I like to give here is that it is said the calmest place, hurricane, is the center of it, or the eye of the hurricane. So while the state of anxiety can be compared to a hurricane, we have to ground ourselves to bring to the center of the hurricane. So what we can do is we can bring our chaotic senses to present moment by simply observing this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. We can look for 5 things that is around us, hear for 4 things that is around us, look for 3 things that we can touch that is around us, 2 things that we can smell at the present moment, and 1 thing that we can taste at the present moment. This usually grounds our senses together, and now we can take a step back to actually analyze the entire situation, observe what is going on, on, and to assess the level of uncertainty at this point of time, to better prepare ourselves and to navigate through this experience if at all it occurs again the next time. Living through anxiety on a daily basis is not an easy thing, as I've seen it among my patients. A patient of mine was going through severe anxiety on a daily basis that this patient finds it even difficult to lie down flat on the bed to sleep at night. This patient usually ends up sitting up straight to sleep, and when I referred this patient to a psychologist, this patient found it difficult to even ride an elevator. The psychologist had to come down to assess this patient and start treatment. One thing I learned after reading this book, A Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl, is that we have to take it one day at a time. Dr. Viktor Frankl is actually a Holocaust survivor. He explains vividly his painful experiences, of course an understatement, the atrocities done onto him by the Nazis. While many others who came together with him in the concentration camp simply have given up the will to even live, lying down on their own waste, this man found a way to live through it and came out of it alive. And his way was simply to find a meaning to live through it daily. And his meaning was the love for his wife. He will simply conjure up imaginary conversations with his wife, or even simply picture that his wife is around him when he's living through the days. A famous psychologist from University of Cambridge, Olivia Remis, said that by doing something with somebody else in mind that we deeply care about, or some work that we deeply care about, usually can carry us through the worst situations, such as the state of anxiety. Anyhow, being overwhelmed by the amount of tasks and commitments that we have on a daily basis itself can cause us to go into this anxiety distress. By learning how to say yes to the things that matters most to us, and by learning how to say no without feeling guilty, can actually reduce the chances of it. So if you would like to know more about this, please feel free to check out this video that I've made here, The Art of Saying No, based on a book by Damien Zahariadis. So till then, take care, see you all, bye bye.